Hi, everybody. Thank you for joining us. I think there might be a couple more people trickling in as we go, but I'm conscious of the time. So I want to make sure that we leave as much time as possible to hear from our webinar speakers. My name is Angie Oberg. I'm the Associate Director for the Office of Climate Action. Thank you all for spending your lunch hour with us. This is the Climate Action Group webinar series. This is a series of webinars that are highlighting our climate action groups, our operational climate action groups. These are the groups where the actual work is happening. Our office is really responsible for helping with coordination and facilitation, but the people you're hearing from in these webinars are the ones who are actually doing the work of helping us implement the climate action plan. And this series was really born out of a request from staff and students and faculty to be able to hear directly from the people who knew what was going on. And so this is the second of our webinar series. The one last month was energy and buildings. These will be posted on our website. So and they're going to be recorded and posted on our website. If you don't want to be on the website, then make sure you keep your camera off and communicate via chat. This is a meeting, so as we go through the Q&A, you will be able to unmute yourself. I'm not going to speak for very much longer. I'd like to introduce the moderator for our event, Jordan Warner. She's an undergraduate student in the School of Criminal Justice at Rutgers, Newark. She's also a member of our Student Advisory Board. The Student Advisory Board is a group of graduate and undergraduate students from across the university that serve as liaisons between our office and the student communities throughout Rutgers. She also served as a research intern for our office over the summer, where she was looking at how other universities, how our peer institutions measure their sustainability. And with that, I will turn it over to Jordan.
Hi, everyone. Thank you, Angie, for the great introduction. I would like to encourage everyone, if they feel comfortable, especially knowing that this is recorded now, to introduce themselves in the chat. And they could say just their name, their pronouns, and their title if they feel comfortable today. And so I'm pleased to welcome today's presenter, Laura Berman and Frank Wong, the co-chairs of the Land Use and Building Design Climate Action Group. Laura is the assistant vice president and assistant university architect at Rutgers Institutional Planning and Operations. And Frank Wong is the assistant vice president of planning and development and design at Rutgers Institutional Planning and Operations. And today's webinar will feature a brief presentation from Laura and Wong on land use and building design climate action group, followed by a question and answer session. Please note again that today is going to be recorded and it will be added to the Office of Climate Action's YouTube channel and newsletter for anyone who couldn't join live. If you wish again to not be recorded, please feel free to stay off camera and share questions and comments using the chat. So I'm going to turn it over to Frank and Laura now.
Okay. Good afternoon, everyone. Laura and I are very happy here to give you an update on our climate action group and talk to you a little bit about what we do, some of the things that we've been doing, and some of the things that we plan to do. Just a little background on the group and what we are doing. So this is a co-chaired by Laura and myself, so it's a little bit of a two-headed monster. I'm primarily involved in the land use component, and Laura is the architect, and she's going to be kind of handling the building design piece, but we work very closely together. So close that you see us both on the same screen. But we work within planning, development, and design, which is an entity within institutional planning and operations. And I guess what I can say is that we are the stewards of the built and natural environment that constitute the campuses of Rutgers University. And the campuses statewide include, of course, Camden and Newark and New Brunswick, plus also research stations, et cetera, throughout the state. So we have a presence in every part of the state, which total over 6,000 acres. So we are a central administrative entity that basically covers everything across Rutgers.
Including RBHS as well.
Yes, I don't want to forget them. Thank you. What I wanted to do is just kind of quickly go through some of the goals of our committee. And I'm not going to read this to you, but basically we're going to make sure that we engage our staff to make sure they're aware of the goals that we're trying to achieve. Engage faculty and the university community so that there's ability for input into this process. Report back up to the leadership as to our progress, and continue to kind of make progress on each of these goals. So what I wanted to do briefly is just to talk about some of the things that we've been doing already that have been embodied in the Rutgers 2030 Physical Master Plan. And this is a plan that's been adopted back in 2015, so it's an institutional planning document. And embodied in Rutgers 2030 are all kinds of green and sustainable initiatives that we've already been working on. So I wanted to kind of give you some highlights of what those are. And you can kind of access the plan at masterplan.rutgers.edu if you really wanted to kind of go through each of the 3 or 4 volumes that, but if I had to boil it down, it would be very simple. It's strategies for buildings, strategies for managing land, and strategies for connections. So it's buildings, land and connections, which kind of fall into what this climate action group is about. So let me talk about buildings at Rutgers. So Rutgers has over nearly 1,000 buildings across the state, which total 29 million gross square feet. And that sounds very impressive, but compared to our peers, other Big Ten institutions and schools of same size, our buildings are smaller and older, which means that they're more run down. They are energy inefficient. They cost a lot to heat and cool. There's a significant deferred maintenance backlog with keeping these buildings running. And they're poorly laid out, inefficient to use. And so instead of what Rutgers has been doing in its past, which is to keep putting Band-Aids on them and keep them going years and years, and sort of like Records Hall, a temporary building that was put up in 1945, we've been taking down these buildings because they're just not economically viable to keep going. So we were taking down smaller, older, deficient buildings and replacing them with more high-rise, more dense buildings, which helps us to achieve a number of things. So let me talk a little bit about our land resources. So as I mentioned, Rutgers has thousands of acres across the state, 6,000 plus acres. We have to continue to be a good steward of our extensive land resources. Because we've had the impression that we have endless supplies of real estate, there's been a historic pattern of sprawl and low-rise development, single-story, 2-story buildings just spread out from end to end of campus. And what we want to transition to is more dense development of new buildings around transit hubs. And greater density actually kind of makes the transit system more efficient. And that's what I mean about needing to work with other groups. Climate action groups, the transportation group is a very important group that we need to work very closely with. We want to make sure that the underutilized acreage needs to support the university's mission. And we want to make sure that the environments we create are ones that create positive first impressions and lasting memories for the students that are here and future students as well. And in terms of connections, it's very closely tied to the buildings and the land. And Rutgers operates one of the largest transit systems, university transit systems in the country, with over 50,000 daily riders. We want to improve the transit system through the development of transit hubs and circulation improvements. But at the same time, we want to promote alternate modes of travel. We won't ever move away from having some type of bus system, but we want to potentially reduce travel demand also by moving education to students rather than moving students to the education, developing newer technologies so that students don't necessarily have to travel as much, reducing the demand on the bus system, and then doing sort of social engineering to make students, when they register for classes, not have to hop back and forth between the different parts of campus so much. So all of these things have been happening in order to reduce transit usage, to reduce sprawl, and things that really help reduce our footprint overall. So this is a summary of some of the points I just made. Removal of low density sprawl, focus on infill development, returning some of these developed sites to open space and wooded areas, and then building more connections to allow biking and walking and scooters and other types of mobility. And these are some examples of the type of recent development that are examples of what I've been talking about, kind of building more dense, using the land more efficiently, building mixed use facilities. So these buildings have retail and housing, and some of the Livingston apartments have classrooms and multi-purpose theater classrooms in them. So it's multi-use, higher density, transit compatible type of development. In terms of land use, it's not just development, it's how we maintain the land. So this is rather low-hanging fruit that we've been very actively kind of making changes to reduce emissions and increasing carbon sequestration. So it's transitioning gas-powered equipment to electric and battery-powered equipment, adoption of low-mow or no-mow areas on campus, creating constructed wetlands to serve as regional detention basins to help green parts of the campus, and better management and expansion of the forested areas that we already have. So the last slide that I'm going to show you shows you some of the no-mow areas of campus and some of the forest areas that we are engaging our faculty to help better manage. So that's an overview of really kind of macro level things that we've been doing and some of the land use specific activities that we've been undertaking.
So shifting to a focus on design and construction, I want to focus on some of the current initiatives and design standards and current construction practices that are underway at the university. New construction projects at the university are designed with the standards of U.S. Green Building Council's LEED Silver equivalent. So LEED is Leadership in Energy and Environmental Design. There are several categories within LEED that you attain credits to receive LEED certification. So silver is kind of middle of the road. It's not the base, it's not the highest, but it's an attainable kind of metric that we use for our design and construction projects to ensure that we're integrating sustainable approaches into our renovation and new construction projects. In addition to LEED, the design standards at the university include ASHRAE 90.1, which focuses on energy efficiency of our HVAC systems. HVAC is heating, ventilation, air conditioning system. So it's the air and the heat and cooling that comes into our building that, especially in Science and healthcare buildings can be high energy buildings. So we look closely at our ASHRAE 90.1 standards and work to exceed those requirements. In addition to HVAC, if we look at our lighting upgrade projects for renovations and new construction, we specify occupancy-based LED fixtures. So that means when you walk in and out of a room, the fixture knows to turn on and off. So if you forget to hit the switch, we're saving energy through the lighting systems and controls. In addition, we look holistically at the design and construction of projects. It oftentimes more sustainable can mean a higher upfront cost. But if you look at the long-term exposure of the owning and operating our buildings, you eventually you get payback in those savings in the energy efficiencies over the life of the building. And we look to design our buildings to stand for 75, 100 years. We don't design 25-year buildings. So it's important if you look at the longevity of those systems and how that saves money over time. Those upfront systems might cost slightly more, but over time we'll get that money back in our energy efficiency and operating the building. And then lastly, just want to touch on implementation of renewable energy sources that we integrate with projects. You've seen solar canopies around parking lots and on buildings. We have integration of geothermal systems at the university. The Livingston Quad has geothermal wells which feed the business school. So there's ways that we look at renewable energy sources and integrating with our design and construction projects as well. So two buildings that I just would quickly like to highlight that exceeded the USGBC LEED Silver requirements and both received LEED Gold certification is Richard Weeks Hall. And this is on Bush campus, completed in about 2018. The sustainable features of that building include the solar orientation of how the building is sited, the envelope design, so the amount of openings and closure, and how sun shading is used to reduce energy, solar heat gain within the building. There's active chill beams. There's a lot of emphasis on outdoor spaces related to this building. Related to HVAC, there is outdoor air and heat recovery energy wheel in the building. LED lighting, which I talked about earlier, reduction of potable water, and materials in the building used a certain percentage of material in the building, recycled content. It's an engineering building, so the building itself is a living lab. If you've been on some of the upper floors of the building, a lot of the research in the building has to do with energy efficiency, and there's a lab that has a building model that kind of monitors the energy use in the building, in addition to some solar and wind studies that are underway. The second project to highlight is very near to this to Weeks Hall of Engineering is the Chemistry and Chemical Biology building. This building is 15% more efficient than ASHRAE 90.1 standards that I'd mentioned earlier. It has advanced air handling and exhaust systems. And this is one of those high energy buildings that I mentioned. This is a chemistry building. So if you're familiar with the chemistry lab that has the large chemical fume hoods that are constantly exhausting air from the building, that's a lot of high energy use. So these buildings are often hard to exceed the ASHRAE 90.1 standards, and this one does by more than 15%. There's a lot of use of natural light into this building and into the labs. And although you have the natural light, you have to think about sun shading to reduce solar heat gain. Construction materials, many of them are used with a high level of recycled content. And there's beautiful green spaces that tie into what Frank was speaking about outdoor land use. There's spaces in front of this building that encourage biodiversity and reduce for the need of irrigation on site. And then I'd also like to highlight the student projects, the Bruce and Phyllis Nicholas Engineering Student Project Studio building located on Bush campus. This is a building, it's a small building, about 5,000 square feet. But it houses the School of Engineering student-run clubs, including the Formula Racing car and solar car, so student projects that are built in this building. It's recently open. It's open to students, but there are still some systems in the building that are being completed. So I'd say it's near completion. And the intent of this project is for it to be our first net zero energy facility at the university. So that means over the course of a year, you look at how much energy is produced operating the building, and then how much energy is obtained through solar energy, which is on the roof. And so this doesn't mean that this building is off the grid. It is certainly not. It is connected to our infrastructure on campus, but it's about the offsets of how the project is, what is gained and what is used to be net zero. So more to come on this project. It's very exciting for this to be the first net zero building at the university. And then lastly, just looking forward at what our committee hopes to achieve through our working group with our design standards and construction processes. We're looking to continue to grow our on-site carbon offset projects, enhance and refine our low carbon construction material policies. So I talked about recycled content, but you can also look at how much trying to reduce the carbon in producing and shipping and in constructing building materials. So that very much aligns with the university's climate action plan. And then also low carbon or carbon neutral building infrastructure systems criteria. We're looking to refine that and enhance that through our working group in the next 1 to 3 years. So that concludes our portion of the presentation. I'll hand it back over to you, Jordan.
Yeah, great. Thank you for the great presentation. And we're going to start off the Q&A question part with a few questions from the members of the Office of Climate Action Group Student Advisory Board. They prepared a couple of questions, and I saw a question in the chat. We'll get back to that right after these few questions, but I encourage everyone else in the audience to share questions or comments in the chat, or you can raise your hand when we'll move on to the open question part. So the first question that the Student Advisory Board has prepared is, how is the Climate Action Group working across all of the campuses, especially in the smaller campuses of Newark and Camden?
So the committees, our group's working with all sectors of the university, and there's certainly opportunities for everyone, whether it's Camden, Newark, New Brunswick, RBHS, to give us their feedback. But we look forward to handling all inquiries and requests from everyone across the university.
And I should know, I highlighted some projects on Bush campus, but we do have LEED certified projects in other locations across the state. For example, the school, Camden's Nursing and Science building is LEED Gold certified as well.
Oh, okay. What are the ethics of building construction and demolition in an area where the university is highly integrated with the community? And how is the community engaged and involved in the building and land use discussions that can possibly affect them?
So I think the question is sort of related to land, campus, the expansion of the campus into the surrounding community, I believe. So there was a point in time when the creation of the campuses impacted the immediate neighborhoods and communities. But I think we're at a point where that moment has passed. We're looking to use our existing footprint more efficiently. We're not looking to expand into surrounding communities necessarily, I would say at this point. We'd rather go up rather than out, is a point that I made earlier. But at the same time, I would say oftentimes the host communities are very interested in Rutgers being a partner in co-developing the fabric of the surrounding neighborhood. So in Newark and Camden, in New Brunswick, there's a lot of interest in terms of town gown partnerships to develop projects of mutual benefit. So, and I would say that whatever it is that we end up doing, we would do it in a much more green and sustainable way.
Okay, great. I'm going to open it up to everyone now, so please put your questions in the chat, and now would be the best time to raise your hand. So I'm going to give everyone a minute, and I'm going to ask another question as people prepare to their questions. So there are VO ride scooters all around New Brunswick campus and even in Newark and Camden that have been introduced in 2020, and there has been an association with investment on micro mobility infrastructure. Has there been any association with that?
So in my presentation, I talked about developing alternate modes of transportation that isn't exclusively automobile or buses, which create emissions. And that includes bikeways, bike paths, sidewalks, so that people can actually walk if they choose to do that between different parts of campus. And kind of part of that equation is to accommodate scooters as well. We have to work very closely with our host communities, so the cities within which we have the campuses, because a lot of times the roads are not university property, but are owned by the city. So that's an ongoing discussion that we will have and continue to have in terms of developing those linkages. But it's a good question, but we are working on it.
Okay, I saw a question in the chat from Monica Roth. Wouldn't LED lighting be something that we can do for older buildings and not just new buildings and new construction projects?
Absolutely. That's a great point. So the LED projects that I spoke about do include retrofitting existing spaces. So we do have dedicated LED projects where that's the only scope of work, is that we'll be going into spaces to upgrade the LED fixtures and lighting. We also have renovation projects where we're even a renovation of an office suite or a part of a building, where any new fixtures that are going in are LED, and then in addition to the new construction projects that I spoke about.
Okay, I saw Katie put a question in the chat. Are we still planning to convert college at campus to more of a park setting? And closing, an example could be closing off College Ave.
Yes, so there have been studies in the past that looked at closing or parts of College Avenue to vehicle traffic and allowing only buses to use College Avenue. Those studies, we'll have to continue to look at that as we move forward. I think from the campus planner standpoint, College Avenue is a critically important corridor, creating first impression for prospective students and visitors. And so what I'd like to see College Avenue is to have a consistent aesthetic from one end to the other. Right now, it's very choppy as you go from block to block. I'd like to see it more tree lined, more wider pedestrian and sidewalk paths along either side. The jury's still out as to whether or not it's going to have cars on it or not, or there needs to be some additional studies. But I could see it hypothetically being transit priority or transit focused. That's something we might look at in the next master plan, the Rutgers 2040 plan, let's say.
Okay, I'm gonna give this to Christina. I saw a hand raise, and then I have another question in the chat.
So I have a question about resources allocated to grounds and facilities. So I was on Livingston recently, and one of the eco zones is completely taken over by mugwort, which means to me that there just is not enough monitoring and management that's occurring. So I am interested in the resources that are being allocated towards grounds facilities and also the training in order to take care of these more sustainable landscapes. Are the grounds crew being trained in order to enhance biodiversity and to work with new irrigation systems?
Yes. So yeah, it's one thing to build a nice project, and then it's another thing to see it kind of being, the lack of maintenance causes it to kind of not do what it's supposed to do. And Rutgers is facing a lot of budgetary issues, but it is something that we want to kind of address. And we're hoping that the staff can be better trained, but at the same time, we'd like to work more closely with faculty and students and perhaps use those as opportunities for research and instruction and more hands-on engagements to kind of create that circle where the classroom instruction moves into the campus environment and perhaps create that opportunity for students to help us in a way. So I don't know if that answers your question, but it's an issue.
Yeah, that's certainly occurring with the green team and with many of the classes in landscape architecture and ecology. I think, yeah, there's a long way to go. I think Brian has a question. Jordan, you're muted.
Oh, sorry about that. So I'll go to Brian's question. So you guys mentioned a lot of building designs, but at what projected year are you guys aiming for? For example, the LED projects, and what year would you guys like to be finished?
So projects, so each year there's kind of an assessment and alignment with chancellor units, an assessment of our deferred maintenance backlog and projects that we have. So I don't think we don't have a specific time frame in which we're looking to upgrade every single light fixture on campus to LED or at the university, but rather it's as we move forward with investment of upgrades, renovations, and new construction, that it's a requirement to use the LED light fixtures. If I've answered that question correctly, if not, please jump in.
Okay, great. I saw Carol mentioned earlier, maybe adopt an area for community engagement. I think that was in reference to Christina's question, but yeah. So I'll move on to Kevin's question. Are we considering NJ Transit train stop closer to Livingston campus?
The question of creating a train stop close to Livingston was popped to transit, but it seems that it's just too close to New Brunswick. It's too so there's the Edison stop and then the New Brunswick stop, and then to create a stop in between that is just too short a distance. And what seems to be much more viable and much more something that New Jersey Transit would consider are enhanced connections to the Edison train station that better serve Livingston and Bush. So there are actually some current discussions that I'm having with New Jersey Transit on a study that they're doing for the greater New Brunswick region, where I'm actually talking to them about that.
Okay, great. So I actually had a question. And so I am very invested in sustainability and environmental efforts, clearly by being here and in all these groups. But I've noticed, especially in the Newark community. So my question was, how is Rutgers responding? Or does Rutgers even have a role in responding to the influx of dangerous and hazardous development projects that harm local communities, even the Newark students? There is a lot of permit hearings going on, like the Aries biochar, which is eco or human waste facility. And how does Rutgers Newark responding to the continuous, and there's hundreds of permit violations with current operating facilities like the Covalent Garbage Incinerator, the Newark Energy Center, and the city of Newark, allowing them to continue to renew their permits?
I don't have familiarity with a lot of these projects that you mentioned. I have to get some more information. I mean, the city of Newark is our host community. We are present in that community. It doesn't necessarily mean we have direct influence on what the city of Newark would want to do, but I'd like to get some more information before and maybe respond to you offline on what this is about.
Yeah, that'd be great. So I'm gonna move on. If we don't have any more raised hands, let me check. Or questions in the chat, you guys feel free to keep adding questions in the chat. From the student advisory group, questions that were prepared. It is great that new Rutgers buildings have built LEED silver standards, and how do the plans in the future to increase the standard to LED gold and platinum?
So the USGBC updates the LEED certification process periodically. And when those updates happen, we look to align our standards with those updates. So, at current state, we LEED silver is kind of the right spot we're looking to attain for our standards. But as energy codes change, as ASHRAE 90.1 changes, as LEED criteria changes, we look to make sure that we're aligning our projects with current best practices and industry standards, and look to exceed those in areas. So, we're always looking to do our best and strive to be better. But it really is, a lot of it becomes contingent along changes that come through these organizations.
Okay, great. I saw Kevin wrote a message about the question before that. There are several environmental justice groups in Newark taking on the issues Jordan has brought up, including RU Newark facility like myself. This is ongoing. And I saw Christina put a question in the chat. More train connections through NJ would be helpful in shifting students, staff, and faculty towards public transit. My commute would be 4 hours a day if I use public transit.
Yes, I think that's a good point. It's definitely a long-term solution that the state needs to get its arms around. It's not just a Rutgers solution.
I saw Lynn wrote in the chat, I know we cannot replace all the buildings, but what strategies are you using to modify energy consumption in difficult areas?
So Mike Cornitas gave the last webinar, and his group closely monitors the building energy usage in all of our facilities across the state. So that information, coupled with our deferred maintenance and assessment of buildings that are less occupied, there's careful analysis and conversations that are had about where decommissioning and demolition can occur, so that we can take these buildings offline and start to reduce our energy consumption across our large portfolio of almost 1,000 buildings.
I'm sorry,
I'm just gonna jump in really quickly and say that that recording is gonna be up and available soon. The big project that Mike is working on right now is through a program through PSE&G. It's 108 of our larger buildings that they're doing energy audits and coming up with engineered solutions to create greater efficiencies. And then the second half of those projects is after the audits are done, then they will install those efficiencies. So that's some of the, I know it's a little bit confusing, but the new buildings is really the area where Laura works, and then the renovations and upgrading existing buildings is really the area where Mike works. So that webinar is available online, but please feel free to reach out with additional questions. We can forward those on.
Thank you for adding that, Angie.
Thank you, Angie. I saw Christina has a hand raised. I'm gonna pass it to you.
I'm just curious, and maybe this information is in Mike Cornitas's portion of this webinar series. I'm curious about the timeline for Cook Douglas. There's a lot of new buildings, on the Bush and the Livingston campuses, and we have IF&H. So I'm just curious about the timeline for some of these improvements on Cook Douglas.
Part of it has to do with what the chancellor dictates is the priority. So it's not simply, institutional planning and operations saying, let's build a building here. A lot of it is kind of driven by on the academic side. I could give perhaps a better response on administrative buildings, but I think it depends a lot on the academic priorities dictated by the chancellor. So, yeah.
Thank you.
Okay, I'm gonna give us we have 10 more minutes for questions for the Q&A section to wrap up before we'll transition to the closing. I'm just gonna mention I saw Katie put some helpful information in the chat about more information about building EEE retrofits. And also here's the recording link for the previous webinar on energy and building. And so I'm gonna energy efficient. And so I'm gonna go back to some more questions that the advisory board has prepared and just continue to keep raising hands and adding questions in the chat. So another question that we had prepared, or they had prepared, is what research is underway or that could be conducted to allow Rutgers to take advantage of solar rooftop on more buildings?
So rooftop solar has been discussed, and there's generally been more a move to do solar canopies and ground mounts than to put solar panels on roofs for issues of access and roof replacement and other infrastructure that's on the roof, including antennas and other research. So at this time, we certainly retrofitting an existing roof with solar is very, very, very difficult. Now, whether we build new buildings with solar. I'll kind of defer, Laura, what you think about that.
So Student Project Studio is recently or nearing completion project that does have solar PV array on the roof. But as Frank mentioned, depending on the building type and the other equipment that usually resides on our roofs, access, foresight about future maintenance and rooftop repair, based on the type of campus and university that we are. Sorry, my lights go off.
Saving energy.
We're saving energy. Yes. There's a lot of opportunities over parking lots and other areas that are not on top of buildings that we have the luxury of maximizing that option rather than going on top of buildings.
Okay, great. So another question from the Office of Climate Action Student Advisory Group is, how can future buildings include transparencies tools for students and faculty to know the efficiency and quality of the buildings?
So part of the LEED certification process is to provide signage and educational components that talk about what features are in the building related to sustainability. It's a very important and I think critical piece, because otherwise you don't know that these things are happening in these buildings. So I talk about some of the research happening in weeks, and there's other information in some of our other buildings about these features. But I think, it would be, as we develop this working group, I think having a resource or maybe as part of the website where we highlight these features. I know Mike Cornitas has a lot of data on this from other projects as well that he has highlighted in the past on facilities websites. But we could certainly do a better job of educating and sharing this information, because we do a lot in this regard, and I think getting the word out and working with people like all of you who have taken your time to join us today, it's an important way of kind of sharing the word about what is going on at the university and the initiatives that are underway.
Okay, thank you. I saw Kevin's question in chat. Where is the new student net zero building on the Bush campus?
So it's right across from the chemistry and chemical biology building, situated there and between the plant.
The central heating plant.
Central heating plant, yeah.
Yeah, it's on the site of the former packaging engineering building.
It's about 5,000 square feet. It's a smaller building, but and because it's single story, it sits in front of the plant, but it has future development opportunities adjacent to it, should that have kind of growth in the future for student organization or the School of Engineering. And it's tied to some of the master planning that work that Frank has completed with the university.
So I actually have a question after talking about you speaking about being able to retrofit, it's very difficult to retrofit solar panels on older buildings for land use. So in Newark, I actually found it very helpful as a study space. For people who aren't familiar with the Newark campus, there's another building which is technically off campus, but it's less than a minute walk away, where they created like a greenery space on top of a building where they put chairs, and it's a great study space and just a very nice to get out of sometimes the urban feel of things, to just feel a little connected with nature. Would it ever be possible for Rutgers to incorporate those on older buildings and create more of a green space, or just more of a study-friendly space for students?
Where there's space and opportunity to do so, we would certainly look to kind of take advantage of that, depending on the building. I mean, not every rooftop has the ability to accommodate that. Yeah, part of what our whole initiative is about is finding existing usable space and making it usable.
Okay, thank you. So I'm gonna have one more question if no one wants to raise their hand or put in the chat. I'll finish it up with one last question from the Student Advisory Board. So last call. But so the question is, what are the ethics of building construction and demolitions areas where the university is highly integrated with the community, and how is the community engaged and involved? An example is redevelopment, gentrification, climate justice issues, and how this will affect the ecosystem and the materials being used.
I think I touched a little bit on this issue in a previous answer where, the university campuses are not looking to expand its footprint and go outward. We're looking to use the existing land that we have more efficiently and go upward. So we're not looking to kind of encroach into surrounding neighborhoods the way, things were done once in the past. I think we want to be good neighbors. We want to engage with community stakeholders and to understand what their needs and issues are, and just to be, as I said, good neighbors. So.
Oh, there's in the chat, Katie just mentioned that, yes, Richard Weeks Hall of Engineering does have a partial green roof. So there's different types of green roofs. There's occupiable green roofs, so spaces like you talked about, Jordan, where you can get outside when you're within a building. But there's also green roofs that are meant not to be occupied, but are designed that way to reduce the solar heat gain that we get from roofing systems. So we typically will install a white roof instead of a black roof to help with solar heat gain. But also there's opportunities to use green materials, and they need to be resilient enough types of plantings that it requires low maintenance, but it helps with the solar heat gain of our roof surfaces as well.
Right, and including reducing the solar heat gain, they also reduce the amount of runoff into the storm system. So
yes,
do that too.
Okay, we're reaching the end of our hour, and I'd like to thank everyone for the great question. And the final question is, how can the Rutgers community support the work of the land use and building design of CAG?
Okay, certainly we welcome additional input from the community and any other member of the surround, our host communities as well. I would say that once people hear what we're doing, that they practice what we preach on an individual level. Don't wait for the institution to kind of make your lives green. You can start by doing things on your own to kind of move the whole initiative forward. So that's my answer. How about you, Laura?
No, I agree with Frank. I think it's about getting communications out, connecting with the community, and just working as a team. I agree with what Frank said. Jordan, if we do have one more minute, I think Christina has her hand raised.
I'm going to ask Katie if we have time.
Sure. As long as Laura and Frank are okay with it.
Yes, we're good. We're good.
Wonderful.
Keep it coming.
So I just wanted to follow up. Frank has been talking about densification and not moving outward, but moving up. So my question is, do you actually have any plans to remove impervious surface, to actually transition parking lots out of use and remove the pavement, or to remove existing buildings and not rebuild them?
Yes, so where possible, we want to reduce our impervious footprint, which include old buildings and parking lots. We want to kind of use more pervious surfaces as well. Pervious surfaces in parking lots that we do have. Hopefully, we will become less car reliant as we kind of move forward, which means that we have less need for paved areas that can then be returned to green. That takes a massive culture change and a shift in the way of thinking. We're still very heavily wedded to our cars and automobiles, and but if we continue to move in that direction, then we don't need to have so many parking lots. I think part of the equation is if we can afford to build structured parking that's has less of a footprint, that'll help as well. But decks are very expensive. But it is a goal that I've stated that we should put more green back on our campuses, and not necessarily. So some of these land use changes don't happen overnight. They're kind of long in coming. But it's still something that I think we want to do.
Thank you.
I'm gonna thank you, Christina, for your great question, but I want to give a very especially big thank you to our speakers, Laura and Frank, in taking the time to share more about their work on land use and building design. And I want to thank everyone here for joining us. And if you're interested in learning more about the climate action group at Rutgers and climate action at Rutgers, we encourage you to subscribe to our newsletter and join us next month on December 8th at 12 p.m. for the Transportation and Action Group webinar. And if you have any questions or ideas, feel free to follow up directly with our office, the Office of Climate Action at rutgers.edu. And thank you. I'm going to pass it back to Angie.
Thanks everyone for showing up. Hope to see you next month. Just really quickly to say, the follow-up to this is there's a logical progression. Last month was talking to Mike Cornitas and energy and buildings. This month talking about land use and new building design. And so you can see the relationship between transportation and land use. So we're going to be talking to the transportation folks in December. There are opportunities for the groups to talk amongst themselves, but these are really chances to dig down and sort of get into the details on this. But thank you all for being here. Have a great afternoon. Hope to see you next month. Bye-bye.
Thank you.
All right.
Yeah. Bye.
Bye. Thank you.